Hello and welcome to Celebrating Excellence, a treasured highlight of St. Lucia's annual Nobel Laureate Festival. During this series of programs, distinguished St. Lucian professionals offer thoughtful reflections on the contributions of our Nobel laureates. The year 2026 marks the 33rd anniversary of the festival, first established in 1993 to honor and celebrate the life and work of St. Lucia's two remarkable Nobel laureates. Sir William Arthur Lewis, awarded the Nobel Prize in Development Economics in 1979, and Sir Derek Alton Walcott, recipient of the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1992. It is fitting then that this year's theme is Celebrating Excellence, Honoring Our Legacy, Shaping Our Tomorrow. Our guest, His Excellency Ambassador Dr. Claudius Preville, reflects on the influence and relevance of Sir Arthur Lewis to the present-day economic, social and political life of St. Lucia and developing countries across the globe.
So for me, as we remember and celebrate our own Nobel laureates, especially Sir Arthur Lewis, the question I would pose is, how would Sir Arthur Lewis see our economic development challenges today? Have we learned anything from him, or are we destined to continue making the same mistakes over and over again, whilst expecting a new and superior result? What would we expect of him in terms of political ideology, drawing upon his life's work? So these are some of the questions I wanted to address. So Sir Arthur Lewis wrote his seminal piece titled Development with Unlimited Supplies of Labor at a time when there were issues concerning absorption of surplus labor, which is really idle human capacity in many developing countries, and had just started their development journeys. It was believed among the neoclassical economists that labor supply was limited. Hence, unemployment never existed in a growing economy. The economy as a whole was susceptible to output in two prevailing sectors, agriculture and manufacturing. In the neoclassical view, any movement of labor from agriculture to manufacturing would impact agriculture's output. However, Sir Arthur Lewis, receiving inspiration one day whilst walking in the streets of Bangkok in 1952, decided to relax the neoclassical assumption of full employment, and this paved the way for a new economic theory predicated on development with unlimited supplies of labor. This would subsequently be called the two-sector or Lewisian model of economic growth. Many countries, primarily in Asia and Africa, have since adopted development strategies that can be well explained by the Lewisian theory of economic growth or some derivative of it for their successful development. Notably, economic growth of the so-called newly industrializing economies of East Asia, Singapore, Hong Kong, South Korea and Taiwan, that was back in the 1980s, have been explained using the Lewisian model by many influential economists, including the likes of Paul Krugman, himself a Nobel laureate, as the reasons for their rapid economic growth. Others in Africa, like Ghana, applied Lewisian economic growth theory and met with some success. However, the Lewisian economic model appears to have been least appreciated or applied in Caribbean countries, despite its dominance in academia and the major institutions of higher learning. Among Sir Arthur's major works are the Lewis Model, the Theory of Economic Growth, published in 1955, Labor in the West Indies, The Birth of Workers' Movement, 1939, and The Agony of the Eight, 1965. In summary, Lewis published in 1954 what was to be his most influential development economics article, Economic Development with Unlimited Supplies of Labor, the Manchester School. In this publication, he introduced what came to be called the dual sector model, or the Lewis model. He combined an analysis of the historical experience of developed countries with the central ideas of the classical economists like David Ricardo to produce a broad picture of the development process. According to this theory, a capitalist sector develops by extracting labor from a non-capitalist or backward subsistence sector. The subsistence sector tends to be governed by informal institutions and social norms. Thus, producers do not maximize profits and workers can be paid above their marginal product. During the early stage of development, the unlimited supply of labor from the subsistence sector means that the capitalist sector can expand for some time without the need to raise wages. This results in higher returns to capital, which are reinvested in capital accumulation. In turn, the increase in the capital stock leads the capitalists to expand employment by drawing further labor from the subsistence sector. Given the assumptions of the model, for example, that the profits are reinvested and that capital accumulation does not substitute for skilled labor in production, the process becomes self-sustaining and leads to modernization and economic development. The point at which the excess labor in the subsistence sector is fully absorbed into the capitalist sector, and where further capital accumulation begins to increase wages, is sometimes called the Lewisian turning point. Going beyond pure economic theory, I will now focus on the practical application of economics to solve the pressing challenges of St. Lucia and the region today. Knowledge, of course, is of little value unless we organize it into targeted plans to bring about a desired result. This seems to be the problem in our country today. Basic knowledge exists everywhere, but its application using targeted plans is sorely lacking, so the people cannot escape poverty, and successive governments seem more burdened than enlightened in their pursuit of the quest for the people. Lewis spoke quite a lot about industrialization by invitation, in which he saw the need for foreign investment to fuel the industrialization process. Citizenship by investment can be a channel for such investment flows can be realized. This idea is sound since a target level of savings and that are needed for investment, given a known value for the marginal efficiency of capital, can be realized. The lack of adequate levels of national savings means we have to turn to foreign investment to fuel economic growth. We have to go back to basics and understand there is a need for economic growth and transformation, and that such growth has to be sustainable and must come from diverse sources. Economic growth should proceed in a manner that will result in the increase of real wages as the demand for goods and services increase. Such growth calls for a vision of multiple sectors, each making important contributions to the economy, and not the current de facto dual sector economy in which the capitalist sector exploits labor whilst keeping real wages down, since there is surplus labor. Policymakers must understand this. We cannot wait for a Lewisian turning point in the economy before undertaking the required transformation. We must not continue to build an economy almost exclusively on tourism, even though that sector will continue to be important for growth, foreign exchange, and employment going forwards. There is now more than ever a pressing need to transform and diversify the economy. The transformation that I have in mind is not like the diversification we have heard so much talk about before, without taking any action. In the first place, our development effort must place exports of goods and services at the center of development. The focus must shift to production of services that can be exported via e-commerce, as well as goods and the use of artificial intelligence. There are initiatives being discussed in the region at the moment on e-commerce at this time, and this needs to gain traction in St. Lucia. E-commerce platforms can make it possible for seamless exports of services online to any country in the world almost costlessly. There are some challenges in doing this, and much of it comes from unreliable internet services and the high cost of online banking services, including payment gateway services. Reform can and should be taken to positively redirect e-commerce development for economic growth. Products also require new standards and quality that meet the demand requirements of target markets. This calls for resources that could be obtained locally or via foreign investment. St. Lucia also needs to take advantage of the opportunities that are presented in several economic integration arrangements, including the Economic Union of the OECS, CARICOM, and other free trade agreements like the CARIFORUM EU EPA, the CARICOM Costa Rica FTA, several other bilateral trade agreements between CARICOM and other countries, and importantly, the final two major non-reciprocal preferential trade agreements with the United States and Canada. With the Economic Union of the OECS, trading within a single currency area confers the advantage of certainty and will reduce the deficit on the balance of payments relative to countries outside the Union. In the proposed economic transformation, to set target sizes of the key sectors of the economy and levels of growth to achieve that particular target by a certain time frame, a very practical starting point is investment in agriculture, making farming a business that would attract the youth, thereby increasing our agricultural output per capita through the application of advanced technologies. Agriculture's share of GDP should increase to a target level of at least 5% by 2030. Taiwanese technical cooperation is already very strong in this area and needs to be harnessed strategically to reorient the economy. Value added in the production and manufacturing of some products and services can become a major source of economic growth and a rapid increase in per capita income. Government must choose the sectors for this growth and transformation strategically and provide the environment, by which I mean both regulatory and incentives, to result in economic transformation on a large scale. Manufacturing's share of GDP should be targeted at 10% by 2030. We need not concern ourselves with producing entire products or services in St. Lucia. We only need concern ourselves with identifying where in the value chain for any product that we already consume can we participate by either producing a small component of that product in St. Lucia or specific services that transform that product. Services are all about the quality of our knowledge base, intellect, and talent. This is therefore the area where we can triumph as a nation by merely acquiring the relevant specialized knowledge to render required services in certain value-added locally, regionally, and globally. We are not restricted by capital anymore. The knowledge is everywhere on the internet, and it can be readily acquired, organized, and targeted plans and generate value added and income for St. Lucians. Services share of GDP should be targeted at 85% by 2050. In closing, government also needs to articulate a clear vision and set target levels of growth deliberately, plans by which such growth can be realized, and actively pursue such growth rates if we are truly desirous of bringing about growth and transformation of the St. Lucian economy. Economic growth will not be in line with any specific number unless government first decides on it, formulates the plans by which it could be realized, and implement the plans on a regular and consistent basis in collaboration with the private sector. We must graduate from being a nation where the international financial institutions like the IMF and the World Bank simply come in, spend a few weeks with our technocrats, and then tell us what the growth rate will be, the portion we deserve, based, of course, on their careful observations of the absence of deliberate plans and strategies to result in a target level of economic growth. I am confident that the policy direction under the current administration can result in the transformation and growth that we need. Indeed, we are already witnessing some success stories from St. Lucia being adopted in other Caribbean jurisdictions like the Youth Economy Agency. More needs to be done, but we have started. There is hope that we can successfully adopt this modified version of the Lewis model for our economic growth and prosperity, both in St. Lucia and in the region as a whole.
Most of the Nobel Laureate Festival events are free and many are recorded. The Nobel Laureate Memorial Lectures will be streamed by the National Television Network, UETV, and on the Facebook pages of the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College, the Cultural Development Foundation, and the Facebook page at Nobel Laureate Festival St. Lucia. Don't forget to call or email for your program. See you at the festival. Goodbye.